everyone. Welcome to the RSA. I'm Andy Haldane. I'm Chief Executive here at the RSA. It's fantastic to see a full, great room, even with feedback, which will disappear in a second, I hope. And also to all of those, I know the many hundreds that are online as well, this has been, unsurprisingly, a fantastically popular event with our very special guest, of course, Salman Khan. Salman, welcome to the RSA. Fantastic to welcome you and everyone else. As you all know, Sal is a visionary founder and CEO of Khan Academy. Khan Academy, as I imagine most of you will know, was founded almost 20 years ago when Sal's cousin Nadia was struggling with maths, or math as you call it, and reached out for some tutoring support, and it's since grown to become a huge success, a mission-driven non-profit organization with more than 250 employees, bringing free world-class personalized education to, I think, now more than 150 million learners right around the world. A true transformation in how we think about education. Sal joins us today to explore a set of really vitally important questions to all of us, whether teachers or parents or pupils, about what could be, perhaps should be, a turning point in our educational fortunes when it comes to the use of AI for education, with potentially, as we'll hear about today, I'm sure, far-reaching, transformative implications for how we learn, how we work, how we teach, and indeed what we even do as humans. His talk in a second will give us a taster for his excellent new book. Here it is, Brave New Words. I say excellent, having read it over the weekend. That doesn't always happen when I say excellent about books. This is one I've actually read. And it is truly excellent. And more than that, in these gloomy, doomy times, inspiring as well. I was inspired by this book, Sal, so thank you for lighting up my weekend. And we'll hear much more about what is contained within that. I'm delighted we'll have a chance to chat about its contents with Sal today. As some of you will know, the RSA, this place, has over 270 years, a very rich history in the sphere of education, which we're very proud about, as one of the early pioneers of standardized examinations in schools, which I'm sure we might discuss again today. And through our new program, the Design for Life program, we're very much hoping to be at or towards, or indeed beyond, the frontier of best practice and thinking on education today, including most recently our related work with DeepMind on AI and personalized education. Nothing could be more important or topical than those issues. So the format is, I'll pass the floor to Sal in a second. He will speak for 15, 20 minutes, as long as he wants, to be honest. And then we'll jump into an open-ended conversation in the room and indeed online about the issues raised by Sal's talk. We'll be hearing about, and I love these words, educated bravery that will be required to steward in this educational revolution. We'll try and wrap up by 2 o'clock. If you're watching online, you can drop questions into the YouTube chat or on social media using the hashtag RSA Education. I'll try to get through as many of those as possible by 2 o'clock, but for now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Salman Khan.
Well, thank you for that introduction. Great to be here. I'll just say a couple of words, and then obviously we'll just try to make this as interactive as possible. But I've always, over the last many years, I've always started my talks with the origin story of Khan Academy. And historically, it's been just like a fun, quirky way of how I fell into this adventure. But now I start a lot of these conversations with that. It's still a quirky way of how I got into this, but I think it actually gives us a lot of clues about where we might be able to go in this new world with artificial intelligence. So as Andy introduced, back in almost exactly 20 years ago, I was a year out of business school. I was living in Boston at the time. My family, I was born and raised in New Orleans. My family was visiting me in Boston. It just came out of conversation that my 12-year-old cousin Nadia was having trouble with math. Unit conversion, I offered to tutor her when she went back to New Orleans. She agreed. And then every day after work for me, after school for her, I got on the phone. We used, I remember at the time, it was Yahoo Instant Messenger. You could type and you could also draw a little bit. And slowly but surely, Nadia, who was 12, almost, maybe 13 years old, got caught up with her class. Then she got a little ahead of her class. At that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin. And I called up her school. And I said, I really think Nadia Rahman should be able to retake that placement exam from last year that had put her into a slower math track. They said, who are you? I said, I'm her cousin. And somewhat surprisingly, they let her retake that test. And the same Nadia who was put into a slower math track was now put into an advanced math track. So I was pretty hooked. I started tutoring her younger brothers. Word spreads in my family that free tutoring is going on. Before I know it, 10, 15 cousins, family, friends all over the country, I'm tutoring every day after work. And I see a pretty common pattern. My cousins, they were all bright, they were all hardworking, they all had access to actually some of the best schools in the cities where they were at. They had great teachers, but they were still struggling, and a lot of times that struggle started to hit when you got to classes like algebra, or a class like calculus, or like physics. And what I saw over and over again, it actually had nothing to do with the calculus or the algebra. It was really that by the time they got there, they had a lot of gaps in their knowledge, either things that they never learned well in the first place or things that they had just forgotten. So you're in an algebra class, it's very hard to do an equation if you forgot your fractions and maybe you get a fractional answer. You have to manipulate fractions or decimals or negative numbers. So spending a lot of time filling in those gaps as their tutor. My original background was in technology, so I said, oh, maybe I could write a little bit of software for them to give them practice problems and for me to keep track of what they were doing. And so I did that. That was the first Khan Academy. It had nothing to do with videos at the time. Fast forward to, that was about 2005. 2006, I was showing this software off at a dinner party to my friend. I'm a great guest at a dinner party. And my friend, to his credit, his name's Zuli. He says, well, this is cool, Sal, but how are you scaling your lessons? And I said, it's very hard to do even with 15 of my cousins that I was doing originally with Nadia and her brothers. And you can only imagine if you're a teacher with 30 kids in the classroom, how hard it is to personalize to every student. And Zuli says, well, I have an idea. Why don't you record some of your lessons as YouTube videos and upload them for your family? And I said, that's a horrible idea, Zuli. YouTube's for cats playing piano and dogs on skateboards. It is not for serious learning. I gave it a shot anyway, and as many of y'all know, that took on a life of its own. And so by 2008, I set up, and I still had the day job at the hedge fund, but I set up Khan Academy as a nonprofit with a mission, and it was kind of a delusional statement at the time, but it just felt like something was in the air with technology and the internet. The mission of free world-class education for anyone, anywhere, which is arguably the mission statement of the global public education system as well. And then it was in 2009, quit my day job. 2010, we got our first significant funding. And if you follow that thread all the way from there, all the way to roughly now, or actually I'll say 2022, and that year matters for us, I'll tell you in a second. Everything that we've been doing, if I really look back, it's been trying to use technology, the internet, software, on-demand videos to somewhat approximate what I was able to do with Nadia and what I was able to do with my cousins. And I didn't know it at the time when I started tutoring. I think most of us have an intuitive sense that, okay, if you can do personalized education, one-on-one tutoring, it's better than if you're just one of 30 in a classroom. This was arguably the oldest way of education if you had access to a great tutor. I always point out, Aristotle was Alexander the Great's tutor and teacher. So if you were a future emperor, king, a princeling, a member of nobility, you got a great education, but very few people got that. You fast forward to about 300 years ago, big idea, free mass public education, but we had to make compromises. The only way we could do that was batch students together, essentially borrow tools from the Industrial Revolution. batch students together, usually by age, move them at a set pace according to centrally determined standards, give them an assessment every now and then. If I get a 70% on the test, you get an 80%, you get a 90%, even though that test has identified gaps, the line must move on. And at some point, those gaps become debilitating for some students. And we say, okay, well, those students aren't meant for what we would now call the knowledge economy. They're meant to go do something else. But what we were seeing, and what I was seeing, and Khan Academy was introduced as much more than just me now, it's like, well, maybe we don't have to make that compromise anymore. Maybe with videos and software and the internet, we could, the internet allows you to deliver it at almost a fractions of a penny, marginal cost, but maybe you could start to do that personalization, and not just outside of a classroom. If you're a teacher in a classroom of 30, which is the ideal that students do have access to a classroom, but the teacher can now personalize more. Instead of even, people often say teaching to the middle, but the research is actually the average teacher teaches to the 22nd percentile. So not quite the kid at the very back, not the kids in the front, but as you can imagine, a lot of kids are lost, a lot of kids are still bored in that situation. So that's what we've been working on over the years. I did not know when I went on this journey that people have tried to quantify the effect of personalization. I gave a TED Talk last year, and I write about it in the book. Benjamin Bloom, educational psychologist, in 1984, he wrote a famous study, which he called the 2 sigma problem. 2 sigma, the Greek letter sigma is the symbol for standard deviation in statistics. A 2 sigma improvement on anything is huge. It would take something from the 50th percentile, and it puts them in the 96th percentile, or put something in the bottom quartile, and essentially gets you almost to the top quartile. And Benjamin Bloom makes a very solid argument. He did some very, I would say, well-constrained studies. People have debated whether it's a 2 sigma effect or not, but very few people have disputed whether tutoring can have a significant effect. But he said, look, if you're able to do personalized tutoring in a mastery framework just means if you haven't learned it well yet, you got that 80%, you should be able to keep working on it so you can get it to a 90% or 100%. But if you do that, you can get a 2 standard deviation improvement. Take an average student and turn them into an exceptional student. The reason why he called it a problem is no one had the resources to do that. And he did theorize, even in 1984, maybe technology could play a role. Now, you fast forward to 2022. At Khan Academy, we had played around with AI a little bit to think about recommendations to teachers, recommendations to students. And then I get an email from Sam Altman and Greg Brockman at OpenAI. And I was skeptical. They said, we're working on our new model, our new AI model. We think this is going to be the one that really captures everyone's imagination, but it actually also might be a little scary. We want to launch it alongside partners that can show a socially positive use case and that have the technical capability to take advantage of the technology. I was skeptical at first, but I was curious. And I remember we had that video conference. And Greg, and keep in mind, this is August of 2022. This is about 4 months before ChatGPT comes out. And this was, ChatGPT is built, it's an application built on, at the time it was built on GPT 3.5. And what they were showing me is was essentially was to become GPT-4. And so much more advanced than GPT 3.5. And after about 10 minutes, we saw a biology question. They asked me the answer, and it answered it correctly. Then I said, explain why. It was able to. I said, write another question and we're all used to this a little bit now, but you could imagine, I think I might have been one of the first 20 people in the world to see this type of thing. I started getting goosebumps. I was like, this could be a game changer. And so I said, yes, we are in. And it had issues right from the get-go. We said, hey, this could be used for cheating. This thing can make up. In fact, it often was making up things, which was known as hallucinations. It's literally the technical term for it. It was shockingly bad at math, at least out of the gate. And it still isn't great at math. And so you can imagine with our team, we started having all of these debates. Months before the world is now having these debates. But, some of us, and I think I was in that camp, I said, well, this can get us that much closer to what world-class personalized tutoring at scale, and not just a tutor for a student, but potentially a teaching assistant for a teacher. But then there were all these other questions about cheating and security and guardrails, et cetera. And this term that I use in the book a lot, educated bravery, this was the posture that we tried to take on. I told our team, I was like, look, we should write down all of these risks. But these risks aren't reasons to stop. These risks aren't reasons to back away. we should design for these risks. We should turn them into features. And a lot of what I've been saying ever since then is, with artificial intelligence, we can all imagine a lot of the dystopian ways that this might evolve, and we could talk about some of them. But it's like any technology. Technology, by its very nature, amplifies human intent. And every technology before this has done the same. And we already know that there's going to be bad people who are going to amplify their bad intent with artificial intelligence. And so the real decision point that all of us have is, all right, are we just going to wring our hands and no matter how many rules we create, the bad actors aren't going to pay attention to the rules, and then you're going to have a net bad outcome from AI? Or will good people really exhibit educated bravery, constrain the risks and move forward and amplify their positive intent? And we could talk more about it, but I think this really is an opportunity. AI is going to have negative and, I think, very positive consequences in a lot of aspects of our lives. But obviously I'm biased, but in education I think it might be the most powerful because we have a potential to use AI, artificial intelligence, to improve HI, human intelligence. So thank you.
Sal, thank you for that. Absolutely fascinating. Teeing up a conversation in the room and online. So I thought we might just start actually by, I'll gather some questions in the room. Wait for the microphone so everyone can hear you. We might gather together 2 or 3 at a time. Just to kick us off though, Sal, with in terms of the guardrails you spoke about, we're hearing a lot at the moment, you know, Jonathan Haidt's in town talking about his book around the problem of inattention that technology brings on and what that can do to distort young minds. What are the guardrails against that? And at what age should we even start thinking about the use of AI in the educational sphere?
Yeah, and you know, I'll say it again, all technology is an amplification of intent. And what's happened is, even before this latest generation of generative AI, AIs have been at full effect in our lives for at least the last 10, 15 years. As all of us go look at our news feeds and social media and Twitter feeds, there are artificial intelligences that have been trained so as to optimize for your intention or your attention and your clicking. And unfortunately, I don't think anyone at any of these social media companies wanted it to polarize people, wanted it to make them feel anxious, wanted it to lead to all of these bad things. But those AIs discovered that the content that oftentimes will keep you scrolling, keeping you clicking, will be things that are polarizing, triggering, or make you feel bad about yourself. You're seeing images of the party that you weren't invited to, or everyone else's life, or whatever looks a lot better. So that's already out there, and that's what, you know, Jonathan writes about, and I agree. Like, we have to be very, very, and a lot of people talk about it in the context of kids, but I think it's happening to adults as well. Yeah. I mean, the number of adults I've seen who are like addicted to their phones, like, it's horrible stuff what's happening to our children. And I'm like, you know, but what's interesting now about generative AI, I don't want to be naive that there might not be negative consequences. In fact, I am sure that those same commercial forces that want to monetize each of us and our data will come up with creative ways of using generative AI to do that as well. But I think what's interesting here is, in some ways, if we use it well, we can now take the AI on our side. It can act as a tutor. That's obviously one of the things that we've spent a lot of energy on. And I'll give you an example of an interaction that I had with Conmigo, which is the AI that we built into Khan Academy, that hopefully gives a glimpse of how it's actually almost the opposite of the frenetic, fragmented thinking that you normally see on the internet. I remember this was about 4 months ago. I've made videos on cosmology. I know a little bit about things, but I always had a question about why does in a supernova, why does a star collapse? Why does a star explode? You would think that the star would just collapse. So I go onto Conmigo and I said, why does it explode? And it didn't just give me like a Wikipedia type answer. It said, well, before I explain to you, can you tell me what you know about a supernova? And I said, oh, well, I know it's a star of a certain mass. At some point it runs out of fuel. The fusion reaction stops. So then why wouldn't the star collapse? And then Conmigo tells me, well, it seems like you have a pretty good handle on the basic idea of how stars work and fusion. But let me ask you a question. Let me, the AI, ask you, Sal, a question. When it collapses, and it says it actually does collapse, but does it collapse quickly or slowly? What's your intuition, Sal? And I said, well, it only happens to stars of a certain mass. So it must be very quickly. And it said, yeah, that's a good intuition. And it said, have you ever seen anything collapse quickly or fall quickly without bouncing? And I said, oh, so are you telling me that it collapses so quickly and there's just so much pressure that it essentially squeezes the atoms at a kind of a atomic level, and then there's a rebound, and then that's what jettisons things? And it said, exactly. Imagine taking a ping pong ball and putting it on top of a basketball, and when you bounce it, the ping pong ball goes into the air. Mm-hmm. And that type of interaction, I would put in the category of truly world-class, Socratic. I think even with a lot of personal tutors, if I said, hey, how does a supernova work? The tutor's like, oh, let me tell you. And, blah, 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 blah. They're not going to say, hey, Andy, so why do you think it happens? But I think that's one example of like, and after I had that interaction, I didn't feel the same way that I feel after I spend 10 minutes on TikTok or 10 minutes on Instagram. Those I usually don't feel like the last 10 minutes were a good use of my life. But with this, I was like, that was a really enriching moment, and I think I'm pretty reflective about that now. So I think there's hope there. I write in the book, there's a whole chapter on AI as a guardian angel, which imagine if you have these same AIs acting on our side as we and our children go onto social media. And I give examples in the book of like, it will be able to observe what is happening, and even as an adult, it can say, hey, Sal, you said you were researching supernovas, but you got stuck on Facebook and you've been, stalking your friends from high school for the last 10 minutes. Do you think that's enough? Don't you think you should get back to work? It'll be able to do things like that. It'll be able to do things like, as a parent, for me to give policies, I was like, okay, I'll let my child use their cell phone, but no more than 20 minutes a day of X or Y, or maybe they can only do that once they've done some amount of Khan Academy, or yes, they can read certain wet news sites, but I wouldn't feel comfortable with them reading articles about certain, if it's really bloody things or, things of a sexual nature, and it can intelligently report back to a parent. So I think there's hope. So it's not AI good, AI bad. It's essentially which AI for amplification of protective and positive intent, maybe doing battles with the AI that's trying to monetize us.
I think that point about, I was struck when I was reading through where you share some of the conversations that it had. As you say, the tutor is not there to provide answers. It's to ask informed, prompting questions and navigate the student through. Presumably they can do that beyond the one-on-one. Presumably you could do that with a tutor group as well, could you?
That's right, and we haven't built that yet, but we've experimented it already, and it's actually pretty incredible. You can do every permutation. You can have the AI facilitate a debate, a conversation amongst multiple peers. Right. We have a project from another nonprofit I helped start called Schoolhouse.world. Schoolhouse.world, by the way, folks can go there, get free tutoring. The way we can give free tutoring is it's volunteer-based. We have a whole mechanism for vetting. But we have a project we're starting to launch, as you could imagine. I don't know what the situation's been here in the UK, but in the US, especially on college campuses, the ability to have civic dialogue, some would argue, has broken down to some degree. We're running experiments, which we're calling dialogues, where we actually find people with diametrically opposite points of view on hot-button issues, and then we have them have a conversation with each other. And we are also experimenting with the AI being able to facilitate that conversation and being able to give feedback to each other. Right now, we have it so that after the conversations, the participants give feedback. Yes, I felt heard. Yes, that person was able to understand my point of view. They don't have to agree with my point of view, but at least they were listening to it. So I can imagine AI being able to facilitate this type of thing, be able to, you can actually have AI be participants in a classroom too, as a student, which is interesting. So yes, there's every hour you think about this stuff, you realize that we're being too narrow in our thinking, that there's more that you could do here that could actually amplify human interaction.
Fascinating. I mean, that capacity to disagree agreeably is so important at the moment, right? For all the reasons, and if AI could facilitate that. Let's get the audience and collect some questions. And some microphones going out. Let's start there at the back where I can see the first hand, and we'll do 2 or 3 in a batch. The lights are on.
It is on? Okay, great. I wanted to say that I think Khan Academy is one of the best at doing this, but I was wondering, how can we make EdTech for the 95% rather than the 5% who have the family environment and the motivation, and what role can AI play in this?
Hold that thought, Sal.
Okay.
Let's pick up. Let's go just here in front, and then...
Hi, sir. I'm an independent researcher from India coming to UK for a field visit for summer school. I wanted to ask, I was recently reading a research paper by Cambridge University where they were raising concerns over all the different hallucinations that are going on with the current large language models, particularly ChatGPT based. So how does Khan Academy exactly mitigate hallucinations in its process and make it more personalized? I want to know.
Should we take those 2, Sal?
Yeah. So, the first question on the 95%, that's to a large degree why we exist as a nonprofit. Free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. Obviously, a large part of it is make things that are hopefully the best in class and make them as accessible to people as possible. That's what we've always tried to do. Just being out there on the internet, and now Khan Academy is in 50 languages. We have localization efforts all over the planet. And even that, and the AI, and we can get into the economics of it more, it's very computationally intensive. So we haven't, until very recently, we weren't able to give it away for free. So we had to partner with school districts and schools that could provide some resources so that we could, essentially to pay for the computation. Recently, we had an announcement with Microsoft. They're giving a big grant of computation. We've been able to put the teacher tools for free for all US teachers, and expect an announcement soon for all UK teachers, hopefully by the end of summer. I haven't said that publicly yet, but the...
you have now.
Yeah, so yes, that's going to happen. That's going to happen shortly. And this is something, actually, just to double click on that point, it's a if you were to pay for the premium version of ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, you're talking about someplace between $10 and $30 a month to use these types of things because the computation is so expensive. So it's a pretty significant thing for at least all teachers. Our goal is initially all teachers in English-speaking countries and then hopefully all countries to at least have these types of tools for them to be able to do lesson planning, writing progress reports, grading papers, creating lesson hooks, designing projects. I mean, we have 50+ activities for them to refresh their own knowledge. So that's one phase, and then we're working on making it as accessible as possible for the student side, partnering with philanthropists, partnering with school districts to make that possible. And just that goes a long way. The way I think about it is when I was a kid, if you really were motivated, you kind of had to power through a textbook, and maybe there was 5% of students who had the real capability of doing that. Then once the internet and Khan Academy and video and software and all that comes along, if you're really motivated, maybe 10 or 15% of students could really do that. And now AI will hopefully broaden that more. But even if you make it amazing, you're still not going to reach all students to that question. The one thing I appreciate, I was a little bit more naive about it 10, 15 years ago. I thought if we could just make the best, amazing online thing, the flowers will bloom and the angels will sing and all of that. But if you really want to reach most students, it has to be through some type of a formal mechanism. Usually the school system. Usually that's how you're going to drive the engagement. And so that's why we've been investing so much in teacher tools from the beginning. But even though we make Khanmigo available to anyone, our main vector, our main vehicle is going through school districts because that's what's actually going to drive the engagement for the other 95, well, I would say the other 70% now, because now 30% will just kind of do it on their own. In terms of the hallucination question, so 2 things. Right out of the gate when we launched Khanmigo about 1.5 years ago, our main way of mitigating or even preventing hallucinations was anchoring it on existing Khan Academy content. So when you prompt these AIs, you essentially give it a bunch of text, some that you don't see, it's happening in the background. It'll index on that. And so that will significantly lower the chances of hallucinations. One thing I'll say, we've, as part of it, part of the educated bravery or doing the responsible thing, we want to be very transparent with users. Like, hey, look, this thing can make mistakes. This thing can hallucinate. And I point out to folks, this isn't a new phenomena. Even with the internet, good digital literacy, just because you do a web search and you found a link does not mean that what that thing is telling you is the truth. In fact, that's usually intentional misinformation, while the AI is usually unintentional misinformation. And even before that, what you're reading in the newspapers, what you're getting from, from the media, we've learned over the years, isn't always exactly, the full truth. So you have to learn to judge your information. And so this digital literacy extends now. But in that vein, I was making a video recently on digital literacy, on how you should use AIs. And the models this is from Google, from OpenAI, from Anthropic, from Microsoft. They've gotten dramatically better just in the last year, where I was trying to, in real time, make it hallucinate. I was saying, give me the mass of the sun to 9 decimal places. It wasn't hallucinating. And I think what they're doing is they're doing some lookups behind the scenes. So the simple answer is the problem has gotten a lot better over the last year. It's improving almost on a monthly basis. And on top of that, you can anchor it with well-vetted sources. People I talk to, they think that this problem will be completely eliminated within the year.
Wow. Lots of questions were sent in online. Let me pick off one of them. And we have lots of teachers and educators in our fellowship cells. So I'm not surprised. One question is whether this will make them all redundant.
Oh, will it make teachers redundant?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Not, oh yeah, it will. Oh yeah, I recognize the question. I'll be very clear, and I've said this from the beginning of Khan Academy. If I had to pick between an amazing teacher and no technology versus amazing technology and no teacher, I would pick amazing teacher and no technology every time. Now, luckily, we don't have to have that trade-off. Well, in some places, some parts of the world, there isn't access to a school or isn't access to a teacher. So I do imagine in those places, if technology can help raise the floor, that'd be great. And there's stories, there's someone we've grown to know, young woman in Afghanistan, Taliban takes over her town. She's written a book now, her name's Sola, and Khan Academy, pre-AI Khan Academy, was her lifeline. And she starts on it when she's 12, 13, and she talks about how the day that she realized she was learning more than her brothers in the Taliban-controlled schools, which not a high standard, but and then she decides she wants to become a physicist. She lies to her parents, goes to Pakistan to visit family, but really to take the SAT because it wasn't administered in Afghanistan. That's when I found out about her. People were trying to get her a visa to come to the U.S. She didn't have a high school diploma or anything. Arizona State University eventually admits her. The New York Times, there was an op-ed about her that helped her get her visa. This Sultana is now a quantum computing researcher at Tufts University. So that's the type of thing that when you talk about raising the floor, Now, Sultana would have had an even better outcome if she actually did have access to good schools, maybe not the ones controlled by the Taliban. I don't know. But the ideal is you have access to a great teacher, but then the tools can help personalize and empower that teacher. So the way that we've been talking about it, and we're going to have on the order of about 1 million students and teachers in real public schools using Khanmigo this coming fall, formally in classrooms. And whenever we do the professional development training, you can sense that underneath there's a little bit of tension around, is this going to marginalize the teacher in some way, shape, or form? And what we point out is, if I told educators, your district, your school just discovered $1 billion, and they're going to use that money to hire amazing new college grads who can answer questions for your students when you can't reach every one of them, but can also help you with things like lesson planning, grading, et cetera. But you're still in charge. You're the conductor of the orchestra. Would you want that teacher? And the teacher's like, of course, I would have, I've died to have some support like that. Well, now you're going to have that level of support. And allows the teacher to focus more of his or her energies on the human element of it. I think anyone who goes into teaching, they go into it fantasizing about having those conversations, having those interventions, those connections with students that change their lives. And what we see, and we saw this even before AI, is that if you allow some things to happen, more personalization, et cetera, you arm the teacher with better data, the teacher actually has more freedom, not less, to then do other things, like sit next to students, do small group interactions. And now with the AI being able to help write progress reports and some of the bureaucratic things that teachers, we have a school district in California where they're saying the AI, Conmigo, is saving their teachers about 10 hours a week, each. So imagine just that. You take 10 hours out of, that's time for themselves and energy that they can put with their classroom.
Fantastic. Let's go back in the room. We'll go this side of the room with a couple of questions. Maybe here and here. The lady just, yeah. Oh, and then we'll go to you, sir. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, thanks for such an interesting talk. I'm a PhD student at the UEA, and I'm neurodivergent, dyslexia, ADHD, and I'm just wondering how AI could help students who are neurodiverse. Are there any tactics autistic kids could use with ChatGPT, for example, to help them navigate the world, really?
Yeah.
Question.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Sally, why do you take that one, then we'll go here.
Okay.
Sal.
Yeah. So I, what I'm about to say, I don't have expertise, and we've done no formal studies on this dimension of it, especially with AI. I can tell you anecdotally, even pre-AI, I've gotten a lot of letters, even from those early days, 2006, 2007, from families, either students who themselves were dyslexic or families or parents saying, this really helped my child because it was auditory and you're seeing the writing, and these were just videos, and then they could practice and go at their own pace, et cetera. I was just on Thursday, I was in Orlando, Florida, speaking to many educators, and I was talking about AI, et cetera. One of the school districts that we've been working with is Palm Beach, which is a very large school district on the order of about 100,000 students. And one of their district leaders told me that one of their faculty members who works with students on the autism spectrum, that they were seeing that these students in particular were engaging with the AI more than other students. And now, as soon as you hear that, you can say, well, that could go either way. Maybe that's more isolating, not less isolating. But what they observed, and this is observational, and I'm hearing this, and you're hearing this third hand, I heard it second hand, was that it actually, these students then got more practice with that communication and then felt, this was what the teacher was saying, felt more, she observed that they were interacting more with their peers, not less, by being able to practice more with the AI. So, and this wasn't even designed for that. But I could imagine whatever could be, state-of-the-art, research-backed intervention type things, you could start to build into AI. And many of us, right now we are imagining AI as kind of a chatbot type thing. And we have a project right now with Angela Duckworth from University of Pennsylvania. She's an educational psychologist, does things like grit, resilience. Some of her interventions we are building into, and the AI administers them to help you build focus, et cetera. But you can imagine in the not too far future, and I'm talking 1 to 2 years, you're going to be able to make eye contact with the AI. You're going to be able to talk to it in a very natural way. And it will be able to give you feedback and things like that. So I can only imagine that it will be able to help, especially once people make more special purpose tools.
Thank you. Great question. And here.
Hello, Sal. I'm Nazmus. I'm from Bangladesh, and I'm a final year economics student at the University of Warwick, and I prospectively graduate next month. So initially, I'd like to express my gratitude to you, because when I was a child, I used to struggle with mathematics a lot, and my parents were really worried about me, and I was constantly nervous, even while engaging with people, because I was not performing that well in school. And that's when Khan Academy helped me a lot, build my confidence, and also understand maths in a much more simpler manner. So I'm extremely thankful to you.
It's good to hear that. Thank you.
Yes. And in terms of my questions is that AI is one of the very few technologies in our world which is progressing and advancing on multiple exponentials at the same time. So my question is, how can we utilize this exponential progress of AI tools and optimize it in order to scale, distribute good quality educational solutions to, like in the context of under-resourced environments in the most resource efficient manner?
Yeah, and this point of people have talked about exponential growth and inflection points and singularities. People have been talking about it for decades. And I even feel weird saying this, but we are in it right now. Like, for the last 10, 20 years, people said, oh, the singularity is coming. And there's different singularities people have talked about. Just one with potential one for AI, and it felt like science fiction. There might be one in healthcare and, other types of singularities, but we are literally in it right now with AI. Even the people who are, I talk all the time to the researchers at OpenAI and Google and all that. Their heads are spinning by how fast things are moving. It's almost on a weekly basis you're seeing a breakthrough that 10 years ago would have been a breakthrough of the century type of thing, and it seems to be accelerating. What I tell anyone who's thinking about it, it can be stressful. Just recognize that you actually are on a leading edge. Even if you're just thinking about it at this point. How do you use this as a tool for good? That's what we're trying to do. I'm sure others are as well. Where, yes, if we can just bring, the beauty of these things. My family, you might know, we're also Bengali, from Bangladesh and from West Bengal in India. And I remember when they gave me access to what eventually became GPT-4, I slacked Greg at OpenAI. I says, does this work in other languages? And he said, I don't think so. And then the first thing I asked it something in Bengali. And it immediately responded back. So I took a screenshot and I sent it to Greg and Sam. And it's like, yeah, after you asked, we tried it too. It does work in every language. So it has this kind of emergent. So the good news is, in many ways, it's already localized. Now, it's not quite that easy, because even our team, as we're trying to make Conmigo available in other countries, the interface and even the prompting and the guardrails, that it won't cheat or that it won't let you have certain conversations that are inappropriate for a child, the further you get from English prompting, the less those guardrails. So we're having to do a lot of work to make sure those guardrails are in place. But the simple, within years, single-digit years, 1, 2, 3 years, these types of technologies will be accessible, and the cost curve is coming down dramatically. What was costing about $70 a year for a student to use it at a reasonable level is now probably closer to about $10, and hopefully it'll get cheaper and cheaper. Now, at the same time, you're going to have these vision-based, and you're going to have this conversational, which also are going to be more expensive. But in the 5-year time horizon, I think they're going to be a lot cheaper. The other benefit for places like Bangladesh is, and this is something we're looking at, we have all this dedicated capacity, all this dedicated compute capacity, which we're building, which we have for our peak loads, which is in North America. Well, at the middle of the night in North America, we're not being utilized. So that's perfect for a large part of the world. So I think there might be a little bit of that surplus compute capacity will be able to be leveraged there. So I can imagine a world where in 5 years, now once again, ideally, if you're in Bangladesh, you have access to a great school and that school is able to use these tools. But in the worst case, you raise the floor by, if you just set up a place with a decent internet connection, and things like Starlink will hopefully make that more accessible, and you could have AI support you pretty well.
I'll go back online, Sal. Sorry to be jumping around on questions. There's loads of them, that's all. So here's the question online. It says, how can we use that superior power of AI you mentioned in a way that still leads to the human brain being challenged rather than every challenge being solved for you? How do we stop it robbing of its agency and the capacity for curiosity?
Yeah, and I think, well, there's a lot in there, and it's all about how, as I said, it amplifies intent. It'll amplify bad intent for fraud and deepfakes. It'll amplify lazy intent. I don't want to do this work. Figure out a way for me. But as I point out in the book, there's a whole chapter on cheating. The lazy intent was already getting amplified by a million different things. Cheating was already rampant. It seems like it's gotten worse since many of us were in school. There are services they're happy to write your term paper for you for $5 a page. These are PhDs in places like Kenya and Nigeria who will guarantee you an A-. They write very well. It's a good income for these folks, but this already existed. Or obviously you could get your sibling or someone else in your school to write your paper for you. And ChatGPT in some ways just leveled the playing field and allows everyone to cheat at the same level. But the solution there is the same AI could also be used the other way around and actually can undermine all those forms of cheating, even the ones that existed before the AI. I write in the book about we're creating these tools where a teacher can assign through the AI, the student writes with the AI is not doing the work for them, and then when they're done, the AI can report back to the teacher, like a great teaching assistant would. And now, instead of just giving you the final paper, the AI can say, hey, we worked, Andy and I worked on this for 4.5 hours together. He had a little trouble coming up with the thesis statement. We eventually got there. This is consistent with the other work he's done. And by the way, I would give this based on the rubric of B-, but you're the teacher, you're in charge of this. And if Andy were to go to ChatGPT or go to one of these websites that'll write your paper for you, and then you were to just paste it in, then our AI will tell the teacher, I don't know where this paper came from. We didn't work on this together. By the way, it's completely inconsistent with the other writing that he's done in this class. It looks a little bit shady. I would look into it. And so there you have AI, not just undermining AI cheating, but all forms of cheating, but maybe even better, supporting students better and supporting teachers better. Now teachers can get much more insights. Teachers aren't able to observe every student as they're writing every paper, but now the AI could say, it turns out 10% of your class was really struggling with the idea of a topic sentence. Here's a mini lesson that you could give tomorrow to help your students with that. And the example I gave with the Socratic dialogue with the supernova, it was pushing me to think in a way that I think a really world-class teacher. I'll give another example. I had a reporter come super skeptical about the AI's ability to handle politically sensitive issues. In the US, gun control is a politically sensitive issue. So this reporter comes, I said, look, you try it out. Don't take my word for it. Goes on Conmigo, and he takes on the persona of someone who's very anti-gun and writes, the Second Amendment is crazy, guns are killing people, et cetera, et cetera. And I think in the US, if you walked into a random classroom where I live in California, most of the teachers would say, you're right, I completely agree with you. And if you walked into a random classroom where I grew up in Louisiana, the teacher would say, how dare you say that? I have 5 guns myself, and I use it to go hunting, and it's going to protect us from a tyrannical government one day, whatever it might be. But Conmigo did neither of those things. It did what I think the teacher should do, which is says, well, before we go into modern day, why do you think the Second Amendment, why do you think the founders first included the Second Amendment as an amendment to the Constitution? And so then the report, this is, but why did it, but it still doesn't make sense. Muskets are different than, AK-40s. Then Conmigo says, hold on. Why do you think it has persisted? So once again, it's building that critical thinking in ways that I think, hopefully happens in most classrooms, but I don't think is.
Fantastic. Back in the room. We'll go down the front here. Thank you. And then we'll swap sides and go around the back, so I'm not being...
Thank you. Wonderful talk so far, thank you. So when talking to people about AI, it might go very well, it might go very badly, it might be somewhere in the middle. But obviously, people who are skeptical can say, well, look at what has happened with the internet, and specifically social media over the last 20 years. Now, 20 years ago, I can remember myself and many other people talking about the incredible power of the internet for teaching, not just as a kind of bucket of information, but for actually teaching. Now here we are. On a global scale, I would say Khan Academy kind of stands alone. If I'm having a conversation with someone and I say, look, the internet can be a wonderful source, not just of information, but actually teaching, look at Khan Academy. So but where is the Khan Academy of English, of art? And obviously there are plenty of websites and but nevertheless, for whatever reason, somehow Khan Academy is known globally as this place that is actually using the internet for teaching. So what would you say it is philosophically, and so on, from a business point of view, that what you're doing that is giving it that kind of unique status?
Hold that thought, Sal. We'll take the 2 questions, 2 hands at the back there.
Thank you. Are you expecting fine-tuned versions of the large models to take you all the way there? Or are you training your own models in-house? And in either case, what kind of data set are you using to encourage Socratic dialogue?
Thank you. Who's next door?
Okay, you've got two here. Dan Sofa here from Founders and Coders. I teach software developers, and I cannot tell you, there isn't a single developer, whether junior or very experienced, that hasn't seen big speed ups in their learning and their productivity. And I can see in our area, which will be very familiar to you, it's a really big force multiplier. And what I'm seeing, and I'm getting really excited about, is the possibility for smaller and smaller groups of people with fewer resources to have really big impacts. The downside of that is I see big concentrations of power and the hollowing out first of the working class and the middle class, and now the intelligentsia. And I'm just wondering if you ever, although I am both excited, I'm petrified as well, and I'm just wondering if you ever have any time at all to reflect on what the social implications are of this technology that we're just rushing headlong into because we're so excited about it. And I share that with you. And by the way, thank you. Your platform got both of my sons through their education, and they're really good mathematicians because of it. So thank you so much.
Three great questions, Sal.
Yeah, you know, hope. I think when you start an organization, it's important to think about what it might become, and it was a little bit delusional in the early days of Khan Academy. I remember I lived in Silicon Valley. We still live there, but by the time I was thinking, like, what should this thing become? And there were some VCs who said, hey, I'll write a check right now. You can quit your day job. But it was always, the second meeting that I was like, they're like, well, you could monetize it by making this part freemium and this and that. And I would think about all those letters of people that I was, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm some type of an angel. I mean, my old job, I was a hedge fund analyst. I was as for-profit as it gets, maybe only for-profit. But I remember those letters and things I was getting from people, and so I read a lot of science fiction, and my somewhat delusional thought, I was like, okay, what's a home run as a for-profit? A home run as a for-profit, you become the next Google, you become the next Microsoft, whatever. But I even saw as a hedge fund analyst, even that's very transient. Even within 30 years, within a generation or two, these companies tend to have this kind of, they come and go. And then, and this is the delusional part, I said, well, what if Khan Academy, just as you have physical commerce and you have e-commerce, well, you have physical institutions. You have the great universities, you have museums, you have societies like this. Why couldn't there be analogs like that on the internet? And I remember doing the calculation, even when it was me by myself, Khan Academy was reaching more students, I believe, in a day than Harvard had in its history. And I said, wow, there's an opportunity for scale here. And so it was a little bit of that mindset where I said, well, maybe what if Khan Academy could last well beyond me, if it could become one of these institutions that exist in the virtual realm, and that's why I set it up as a nonprofit where, its mission is its mission. It's not, shareholder value, et cetera, and I think that has led to it. And, what I'm happy about is I think in the last several years, more people are viewing it that way as more of an institution than as an online type of startup. So that's my best explanation. And I hope we are going to be able to do English, and actually we have a great art history thing on Khan Academy. But with AI, we're going to be able to move faster as well. That's why we're doing writing, et cetera. On the fine tuning, so just as a little bit of a primer for folks, so these models, they're trained on huge data sets. But then on top of that, you can fine tune these models based on more specific data sets. So right now, what we're doing, we aren't doing fine-tuning yet. We have been very particular. One of the safeguards is that any of the conversations that our users are having are not going to be used for the training of the broader models, just from a safety point of view. OpenAI and Google, they are taking guardrails that your personally identifiable information can't get out there, but we want to be doubly sure, so we just don't even share that data. But in theory, we are looking at ways that we might use that to train a version that's just in our sandbox. I've always made the point, this is another reason to be nonprofit, is data can be very powerful for good or bad. Obviously, it can be bad things, sell your data, monetize it, ads, et cetera. But there's good things. It can personalize better. You can measure efficacy, et cetera. So we are exploring fine-tuning, but just within that sandbox. In terms of the force multiplier, it really is incredible. It's something, even in our own organization, our team we're about 65% software engineers or closely or adjacent type of roles. And you know, it wasn't a lot of fanfare, but one day I was just sitting around talking to some of our engineers. This was about 4 months ago, and they got a head start. They were using these tools summer of 2022. I was like, how much does this impact you? And they, with complete straight face, they're like, oh, we're about 3 times more productive. I was like, 3 times more productive? It would be a big deal if you said 30% more productive. Right. But you said 300% productive, and you know, our reaction to that isn't, oh, we only need to hire 1/3 as many people. It's like, let's hire 3 times as many people, because there's so much value that you can create, to your point, with a small team. And if anything, we're seeing that 3x might be conservative, that certain folks are getting, and these aren't exaggerations. People used to talk about a 10x engineer. There actually are 10x, and not even engineers, but designers, and now even copywriters. You know, even we're a nonprofit. We write grants. We took an email thread with a funder, and they wanted a proposal. We were literally able to have AI generate a proposal from that AI thread within seconds. Now, that's not what we sent to the funder, but it got us started very, very fast. Something that first draft would have taken us a day or 2 before, now it took a minute or 2. And then we were able to edit it and then get it out to the funder. So it's a huge force multiplier. What you're worried about, I am worried about. And this is a very open question. Will all of this productivity accrue to a very small number of people, in which case you're going to end up having, you know, the only politically viable thing is you're going to have mass redistribution. Otherwise, you're going to have a revolution on your hands. But that isn't the most, I still consider that pretty dystopian, because you're going to have a lot of folks who, you know, people don't want to just be fed and have shelter, and, you know, they want to have purpose. They want to have meaning. They want to be able to. So that's why, you know, I say the other option, I wrote a blog post. This was before AI, but I called it, you know, Trekonomics, because if you look at Star Trek from an economics point of view, it's a post-scarcity world. And, you know, you're an economics student. You know that the study of economics is all about this, you know, we have scarcity. You can't give everyone everything, so you have to decide who gets what based on prices and supply and demand and all this. But we could be entering into in fact, we are entering into a post-scarcity world, especially in certain dimensions of what we do. And in Star Trek, you know, everyone is an explorer, an artist, an engineer, or humanist, or a counselor of some type. They have human interactions. And I think we kind of have no choice. We have to try for that. Otherwise, we end up in the other alternative. But in order to get there, you have to have a lot more educated people. It's not, you know, we might say it's a nice to have that AI can help more people learn higher order skills, but I think it's a must have now. That if you can't write at least well enough to put the pieces together and be the editor for the AI, you can't code or design at least well enough to put the pieces together, then you're not going to be able to code. You're not going to be able to design. You're not going to be able to write. Now, there are likely to be other jobs that are going to be very human-focused, very relationship-focused, which I think will also be very powerful. But it is going to be a big transition for society to make sure that people aren't completely dislocated.
I'm just writing down Trekonomics, Dory. Listen, we're at 2 o'clock, but we're having too much fun to stop. So we're going to go for another 3 more questions. It's going to be here, it's going to be here, sir, and here.
Hello, thanks very much. You were talking about promoting critical thinking, and I was wondering how AI and your platform in particular contribute to promoting divergent thinking and interdisciplinary learning.
Very good, excellent, thank you. And then we'll go here and then to Sir just there.
Thank you very much. If you were able to become a 15-year-old yourself, what advice would you give to yourself? And if you were able to be 90, what advice would you be, again, able to give to yourself?
All right, I'll take those 2.
We'll just take this 3rd one here, and then we'll, just so I'm not running over too much.
I'm a master's student, and I'm currently trying to explore the impact of AI on gamification of education for primary and secondary education. So my question is, do you see a future where primary and secondary education will be completely gamified for students?
Okay, sounds
Very good.
All right.
Sal, that's okay.
Yes, so the first question around the critical thinking and divergence and relevance and cross-disciplinary, it can you know, a lot of times when I demo Conmigo, I show that a student can show, you know, while you're watching a video or doing a question, say, why do I need to learn this? And then the AI usually says something like, well, what do you care about? And then it can connect it. It actually remembers it too. We've added a sense of memory to it. So I think that's a point of help. It can speak in a tone that connects with the student. I've seen when we did some testing with students where a student says, well, isn't this just like what we were doing in science class? And there was a math question. It's like, yes, it's just a different term. So it's able to answer those types of questions. So I think for that student who already has some of that curiosity and wants to connect it to history and science and math, and it can do that brilliantly. It is really like having a Renaissance person tutor with you. I think the real opportunity, though, is as teachers use it for things like lesson planning, it can start to bring some of that multidisciplinary nature to it. I'll say one thing, we didn't talk a lot about assessment and standardized assessments. Standardized assessments have their value, but they tend to be pretty narrow because you can only measure certain things. AI, I believe, and we're working on this too, is going to dramatically broaden what you're going to be able to measure. So you're going to be able to measure more, I would say, true critical thinking. Imagine if in 10 years your national exams feel a lot more like a PhD defense, where it's actually having a conversation. Well, why do you believe that? Are you sure? How do you know? How do you know that that's, as opposed to which choice do you think it is? That's where we're going. In terms of advice to a 15 or a 9-year-old, my son who's 15 is here, so I give him advice all the time, whether or not. I would say you should be playing with this all the time. You know, my son's really into piano, and I've encouraged him. I was like, you know, you should use this technology to, you could even use it to help compose music, make music videos for what you're doing. I remember, you know, a lot of y'all know about the Screen Actors, not the Screen Actors Guild, the Screenwriters Guild, the protest with the movie studios, where they were trying to get the movie studios to promise that they wouldn't use generative AI to write screenplays. And I was thinking, this protest is completely backwards. If I was worried, the production houses should be worried. Because now, if I have a good sense of story, and if I can construct a great story, I now will actually be able to produce the whole movie for the budget. You know, what used to be a $100 million movie might turn into a $100,000 movie or a $10,000 movie, and I won't need the gatekeepers. And that's a trend that we've seen even, you know, with YouTube. It's, you know, if I had to go through gatekeepers, there might not be a Khan Academy, but I had the ability to self-publish. So I think it's going to be hugely democratizing for someone who wants to produce and be creative. So I would encourage a 15-year-old to be a creator. But I would say that it's very important for people to be more multidisciplinary. Because it's going to be small teams, a team of 1 or 2 or 3 people could do the coding, could do the design, could do the copy editing, could do the marketing, could do, you know, if it's something that's artistic, or they do all of that. So I would tell a 15-year-old to play with all of these things, but also have your core skills, the writing, the reading, the mathematics down. Because once again, you don't want to defer that to the AI. You want to be able to keep pace with the AI. 9-year-old, I'd be having a great time having all of these philosophical conversations with the AI. You know, like the questions that you know, it is really like being able to talk to an alien intelligence in certain ways. In fact, you know, I've wanted to write a science fiction book about leveraging AI to communicate with an alien intelligence, because that's probably, but anyway, that's a whole, we might be able to talk to animals.
Next book.
Yeah, if we train it right. But yeah, I think if you're curious, and you're 90, this would be a field day. And the last question was on gamification. You know, I sometimes joke the education system is already gamified. It's maybe just not the most fun game. You know, like a letter grade. Look, you better do this, otherwise you're going to you're going to fail, or you're not going to pass it. That's a game. It is gamified. Those are extrinsic motivators. But one thing that I've always advocated for is if we could move more to a competency-based system versus a seat time. Today, globally, it's how long you sit in a chair, and the outcome is variable, A, B, C, D, F. I think it should go the other way around, that everyone should try to get to that A level. And what's variable is maybe how long it took you or the paths that you took to get there. Nice. But you can gamify that in certain interesting ways and potentially even use AI. One thing that we are working on, you realize a great tutor doesn't just wait to be asked. A great tutor will be proactive. When I used to tutor my cousins, I would call up their mom. Where are they? They didn't do their work, et cetera, et cetera. I think AI could also provide those nudges and get the other human actors in the student's life to also provide those nudges, the parents, the teachers, which could go a long way.
Way into overtime. I can't resist, Sal, asking one more question before we...
Yes, I'm having fun too.
So next week in this country, we're having an election.
No kidding.
On your Independence Day. And then later in the year, you're having an election on our bonfire night. The jokes just write themselves, right?
I don't know what bonfire night is.
No, I'll tell you later.
Okay.
What would your one piece of advice be to an incoming new government, new education secretary, about how we transform things for the better in the UK and the US?
I would, there's a bunch of layers to it. I think the lowest hanging fruit is I would give every teacher in either of these countries or all countries access to these AI tools and give them support to use it. That would be a super easy win. If we can replicate what I just described at that one school district in California where the teachers are saving 10 hours a week, that is a gift. That is, universally would be politically popular. On top of that, I would figure out ways to get universal access to a tool like Conmigo, which, the costs are coming down pretty dramatically. And well, I don't know what the per pupil expenditure is in the UK. I'm guessing it's someplace in the middle of where, at the low end in the US, it's about $10,000 per student per year. At the high end, it's about $40,000 in places like New York. But, for the computation costs on the order of $10 or $20 a year, 10 or 20 pounds per year, you can at least start to give every family in the country access to these tools. I think would be a great start. I won't claim it's going to be a panacea, a silver bullet, but it would at least give a level of support that will start to make a dent. If I were to think real structure, and what I just said, I actually think a politician could just do it tomorrow, and it's easy, and we'd be happy to help them do it. If I had real control, I would get a competency-based system. I would create national or international-based examinations, rich examinations, not just multiple choice. That if you did it, and I would convene all of the employers, say yes. If someone does X, Y, or Z, you should consider them on par with a top graduate from Oxford or Harvard because they know their stuff just as well. In fact, so much so that even a top graduate from Oxford or Harvard would also want to get these credentials so that they can show that they truly have those skills. And if you did that, then the Khan Academies of the world could create tools to support people, and then you'd have a kind of cradle to professional life education, competency-based education system.
Wonderful. What an amazing discussion that has been. For all those online, thank you for joining us. Thanks for all your questions. And you continue the chat, actually, through the RSA's digital platform Circle. We're hoping to stir up a conversation among our fellowship off the back of this today, Sal. You also get some links to Sal's book online as well. For those in the room, you can get links to Sal's book outside this room. With his paw print on it as well. So it just remains for me to join me in thanking Sal for an absolutely wonderful discussion on how the future might look. Thank you to Sal.